Welcome to Candid Conversations. Hello, I'm Dina Diamond, and today we're talking about divorce and separation. Our guests are going to teach us how to protect ourselves, both legally and emotionally. But first, you know them and love them. Becky Lantry and Gary Brienda.
Hi.
How are you, ladies?
Wonderful, thank you.
Can't complain.
I know. Well, today we're talking about relationships. Divorce, obviously bad relationships, but I've been very lucky all my life. I have been able to keep excellent relationships with my ex-boyfriends.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is amazing, and I know it's an
That's
oddity.
tough.
It
That's
is
usually
difficult.
quite tough.
It
I
is,
mean,
but I've been
depends.
so lucky. One of my ex-boyfriends, I was the best man at his wedding.
Wow.
Yes.
Very good.
I know. So
Very good.
I've been very, very lucky. How about you guys?
Well, you know, there's something to be said for that because you liked him as a person, right? You're
Yes.
probably great friends.
Yes.
So then I was thinking about that earlier when we talked, but I was like, sometimes we get into relationships and we're with somebody and we project onto them this romanticized thing. When all in all, it was really a good friend. It was somebody we were supposed to stay friends with. But it just, you know, we took it onto the romantic path. And then there are those relationships that we're friends with them for a while. And we're like, oh, there's no chemistry. There's no way we would ever, no, I don't see him like, he's like a brother to me or whatever you call it. And then the romance slowly starts to build and you go, you're everything that I was looking for. So I'm always curious about this gray area in love and relationships, that it isn't just black and white.
Right.
And, you know, and the relationship, I think, reveals itself over time.
Oh, yes.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
I myself, actually, I've remained friends with, I'm going to say 99% of my exes. I had one bad egg, just one bad egg.
Really?
Thank goodness I was not married to him. But the rest of them, I mean, to this day, I can actually call on them. When I sent my daughter to college,
Yeah.
Yes.
she was going, Mom, I don't know how you do that. I said, they're my friends. I call them on the phone and say, Desi's there. She needs this. She needs that. And they would show up.
That's amazing.
I don't get it. I said, you always got to have a good friend.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's
That's
the basis of the foundation, you know.
Right.
And I think there are times when people outgrow each other, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we are talking about marriage and divorce, but you know, it's human nature to want to grow and have a reflection that's next to you that is where you're at in life. And if that means you were together for a season, a reason, a lifetime, then so be it.
Right.
It just so happened we live in society where there's finances, there's rules, there's children, there's houses and properties and things you have to sort out. But
Yes.
at the end of the
Yes.
day, that's all that really happened. Is
Yeah.
there was a transition that had to happen. Two
Yes.
people were close at one point, and now it's time to move on.
So I don't think we are necessarily the norm, but we just go to
Right.
prove that men and women can be friends.
Yes.
We can
Exactly.
keep it that way, but of course today we're talking about a more serious issue, divorce.
Yes.
So we will be right back with our very first guest.
Riding a bicycle can seem like child's play.
But only if you're playing indoors.
Riding in the real street has real consequences.
Play it safe. Ride by the rules. Cars and bikes need to play together.
Joining us is Leslie Newman, attorney specializing in amicable family transitions. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
We are just really thrilled because divorce is a difficult subject. What do you think of prenups?
I think that prenups can be a very, very good idea, but a lot of it depends on how they're done. There is a protocol, there's a way of doing it where actually husband and wife can participate together with both attorneys at the same time. So there is no intention of one of the attorneys doing all the drafting and perhaps trying to put the other spouse to be in an inferior position. And so this protocol, which is kind of a collaborative protocol where both the husband and wife to be sit down with their respective attorneys and talk about what their goals are and what they think the finances ought to be and how they want to protect any assets that they might already own going into the marriage, or protect assets for their children if this is going to be a second or third marriage. And that way it's done not only lovingly, but it's also done in a way that will help them as they get into the marriage, because they have dealt with some very serious subjects such as financial planning, which is always hard to do.
Absolutely. Are people willing to do this, or is it more like pulling teeth?
No, people are willing to do this, and I think more and more people are entering into prenuptial agreements. They certainly help with the planning. As I said, they help to put the financial into perspective, whether they're going to have an account together, various accounts together, all their accounts together, what they're going to do. It really makes them sit down and think about it.
A lot of people would assume that prenups are only for the rich. So, you know, anybody should have one?
Anybody should have one, and the prenuptial agreements that I've had the honor to work on, for the most part, the couples who are doing the prenups are not rich. They may have a house, they may have some bank accounts or some investments, but for the most part, they're not rich.
Okay. Wow.
Besides a prenup, what else can a woman do to protect herself when dealing with a divorce?
Well, when dealing with a divorce, I think it's really, really important to prepare for the divorce and to know a lot about what the community property consists of. And sometimes husbands may be the ones that have all the information, not always. Sometimes it's the women as well, of course. But if the woman doesn't know, if she hasn't been the one to write the checks and control the finances, it's really important to find out what there is, to talk to the accountant, to get records, and to even ask her husband for the records, because it's not a secret. In a marriage, there's a duty for husband and wife to tell each other what they have and what they're doing financially. And it's very important to do that, and this information is not exclusive. Each spouse actually has a right to know throughout the course of the marriage. So it's important to know what there is. It's important to know what the options of divorce are and to educate oneself about what they are and how to do the divorce.
Let me ask a silly question. So you're sitting down, you're thinking about divorce, but you're getting married, you have kids. Do you change the prenup?
Are you talking about, do you change the
The prenup after you have kids?
after you have kids?
Should it?
It's possible. Sometimes people even enter into prenups that the prenuptial agreement will dissolve after so many years of marriage. But those are the ones, I think, that are more set up to really protect a spouse that has a lot of assets and a lot of money, and the other spouse brings in virtually nothing.
Okay. Okay.
But it is possible
Yeah, 'cause
to
I
enter
was-
into what they call postnuptial agreements as
Because
well
I was
during
thinking,
the
I said, okay,
divorce.
now you've got kids in this, and you've got this prenup that didn't include those kids. So should you make changes?
Well, it could be that you might want to, or that you might want to, as I said, make what's called, not so much in the prenup, but doing what's called a postnuptial agreement.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
Well, obviously staying aware and being involved in our day-to-day lives when it comes to the financial business, the banking, checks, etc. What other things do you recommend that women do throughout a marriage to protect themselves should divorce arise?
Well, I think that it's important to know also what the alternatives of divorce are. Not only what you have, but if that should arise, if there are hints that it's going to come, that I think it's important to know that there are different ways to do your divorce, and going to court may not be the best way to do it. A lot of people don't know that they can do it out of court. Of course, the paperwork has to go through the court
Right.
system. The
Right.
judge has to sign that paperwork.
Yes.
But it is possible not to have to step foot in a courtroom.
Really, can you tell us more? I know you're also involved with mediation.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that, how that works?
Sure. Some of the amicable divorce options include mediation, collaborative divorce, and another process that we call cooperative divorce. Mediation is a process where the mediator acts as a neutral, doesn't represent either husband or wife, but helps to facilitate conversations and helps to facilitate the agreements that are made between husband and wife. When I mediate with a couple, I specifically take them through the different steps, which are opening the case, gathering all the information about what the assets are, helping them to do a parenting plan, working with them on the support needs, the ability, and to pay support and what support might look like. and then helping them to make their agreements once all that information is gathered.
It's such a delicate process, you know, and there's so much emotion involved, I'm sure. There's emotions, and there's finances, and there's a lot of power struggles, I'm sure. Are you seeing like a trend now? Are things really shifting and changing? Are more people wanting to just be like domestic partners than go through all of this? Or, you know, I mean, now I'm just curious, because I know like in the millennial generation, we're all just kind of like, would we want to be married? I mean, because we're just here, it's like awful if you get a divorce, and it's just stressful. And so just say boyfriend and girlfriend and get a place together, and, you know, it's just, society, it's shifting. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
It really is shifting, and I think there is a whole plethora of people in their 30s or even going into their 40s who haven't married yet. But it all depends on what the relationship is. If they're
Right.
having children together, then they're still going to have to make agreements regarding those children.
Right.
If they decide to break up their relationship, be it a domestic, actually a domestic partnership doesn't work legally unless the heterosexual is at least 65 years old.
Wow.
Or
Wow.
for same sex, it can be any age,
Right.
as long as you're adults.
Right.
But for heterosexuals, it has to be over the age of 65 to do a domestic partnership. It's still, certainly if you're not married, then you may not have the couple, particularly the father, of course. We always know who the mother is, right?
Yes.
But the father might not have established a relationship unless, of course, if they're living together, the name might be on the birth certificate or what we call a POP declaration at time of birth, that this is the father of the child. So it can get a little bit more complicated that way.
And
Particularly if the
mediation?
couple breaks up
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
the father hasn't had a consistent relationship with the children or the child for a while, then it could get difficult.
In your mediation, have you found anything hidden? Like some things that weren't disclosed?
Well, that's actually not my job in mediation, is to uncover, but I'll tell you what I can do, certainly, is one of the techniques that you can use in a mediation is to do what's called caucusing, or to shuttle between husband and wife or the couple that I'm working with. And so that does give me an opportunity sometimes to talk confidentially, or if I have permission to share that information with the other spouse or the other partner. And so sometimes I can kind of get down to it and say, are you sure?
Are you sure there's nothing
Sure
else?
there's nothing else that's going on? Or your spouse says that there's that bank account in the Caribbean or the
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know about
We all
it.
can't forget about it.
I
This is
know.
absolutely fascinating, and we just barely touched the surface about this, but it's nice to know that besides just a divorce, mediation, and there are so many different types that are more amicable that women and men should both look at before getting into going to court. So Leslie, we thank you so much for being here. This information was invaluable.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
So thank you so
It's been a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We will be right back with our next guest.
Discover 30 years of opera in Santa Monica. Discover the Verdi Chorus.
We are now joined by Marianne Aronson, marriage and family therapist. Marianne, thank you so much for joining us, ironically, on a couch.
Yes.
How perfect!
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here.
Oh, since we're talking about divorce, what is something that a woman who's going through divorce should focus on to keep her sanity through all of this?
Yes. I think one of the most important things is to realize that this is a trauma, and for her not to expect herself to be gliding through this as though nothing is terrible is happening, just because so many other people are getting divorced. And sometimes divorce professionals make it sound like this is normal. This is not normal. This is a very tough time for women. And therefore, it's really important that women take really good care of themselves.
In what way?
Well, for example, because it's a traumatic time, women are likely to be, and men as well, all of what I'm going to say tonight will apply to men as well. We are likely to not be thinking so clearly. We know now from brain research that when we're caught in the midbrain where we process emotions, we are not physically connected to our prefrontal cortexes, so we don't think clearly. And therefore, to not make big decisions, if we can help it during that time, or to get a lot of help with those decisions. And also to recognize that we'll be accident prone and injury prone, and that we need to really make sure we get enough sleep, we take care of ourselves nutritionally, we do everything we can to make sure that we are functioning as well as we can, especially if we have children to take care of.
I don't think anyone has thought about that we need to physically take care of ourselves. We just think of it as an emotional problem. What is one of the first things that women need to deal with you on a divorce level? When they're speaking about the problems, their anger, their fear, how do you harness that?
That, for me, depends on what role I'm playing. If I am a therapist for someone going through a divorce, then I'm going to be focusing on what that woman needs to do to help herself process through the emotions of the divorce, as well as kind of looking at the rest of her life and where she needs to take care. If instead I'm a divorce coach, for example, in a collaborative process, or if I'm working with two parents to do child custody mediation or create a parenting plan, that's a different focus entirely, and we're learning, having them learn how to work together more amicably and respectfully so that they can make better decisions for the children. And you heard Leslie talk about alternative divorce methods.
Yes.
We actually prefer the term consensual dispute resolution because we don't want it to be alternate dispute resolution. But there's mediation, there's collaborative process, there's enhanced mediation where you might bring in other professionals as needed. You don't have to go to court. And that's an important thing for women and men to recognize. There's choice there. You don't have to go to court.
Oh, that's great.
Some cases do need to go to court, of course, but
Of course. But that's great that it's collaborative, where the therapist and the attorneys work together to try and resolve this in a very peaceful manner.
interdisciplinary teamwork, I love that process. It's such a high to be able to participate in a strategic team like that, and to
When
work
you
with
said
the
coach, I got the
families.
vision of someone with a whistle and putting their hand up. So
You know,
like,
we do
coach.
that. We don't use a whistle, but we do. We're much more directive in a collaborative process. We are coaches for a reason, because we are there to help contain the emotion, and we are there to make sure that people present their best selves so that they have a better chance of coming to agreements that are workable and long-lasting for their families. So yeah, I interrupt people ruthlessly when I'm a coach, which I would never do as a therapist. Well, almost never.
Which is more fun, coach or therapist?
Right.
They're just different, Dina. Just different
You really,
processes.
throwing isn't making you lean towards that a little bit more? Well, you brought up that obviously the children are caught in the
Yes.
crossfire. How do we deal with children when we're going through divorce?
What I try to do if I'm coaching, if I'm working with two parents, co-parents, is to get to their common interests. So if we can back up, whenever there's conflict, I like to back up to the last point of agreement. And for co-parents, we know they both love the children and they both want the children to do well. So we back up to that point, and then we get them started. They can talk about the child or children specifically, and when they start to talk about the children and the children's needs or quirks or personalities, the room energy changes.
Okay.
And suddenly they're more on the same page. If we can get that happening, then it becomes easier to start talking about their extracurricular activities or the need for choosing a new school or whatever it is that might be going on for that child. And then they're much more capable of making agreements together.
Now, are the children always in the room for this or no?
I haven't yet had the children in the room for this
Good.
because these are adult decisions.
Right.
These are not, this is not a child's job
Right.
to make decisions for him or her. And kids sometimes want to make those decisions. And we work hard to try to make sure that children have a voice but not the choice in that process.
There you go.
Good question.
That's very interesting. When the kids are the focus of a battle, that's obviously a different set of rules. How do you handle that?
I actually work with children to help them figure out how they can get themselves out of the middle when their parents are not emotionally mature enough to do that for them.
Okay.
Wow.
So kids may have to learn different language, like, you know, Mom, you need to talk to Dad about that.
Right.
Or, you know, Dad, I feel uncomfortable when you talk to me about Mom. so that they don't have to be part of that battle, and they
Right.
need to not be part of that battle. The studies show that it's the conflict between the adult, the parent figures, that is damaging to children in divorce. It's not how many households or how many parent figures they have or what gender their parents are, any of that stuff. It's the parent conflict that is damaging.
Yeah, you're empowering them. You're taking them out of kind of being the pawn.
Exactly.
Which I see so much of. That's the role these children play. You know, they're just almost like innocent bystanders.
They
you
are
know?
innocent bystanders. That's right.
And the damage that it does, like I was, you know, just my friends who came out of divorce. Like, I mean, they're, you know, as kids.
Yes.
I mean, just what it does, how it impairs them in even choosing partners.
That's
You
right.
know, it's just something that happens once, but it just shapes the rest of their lives, you know? So it's just wonderful the work you do in that regard.
Thank you.
Yes.
What are the rules that you have for the parents? Like, for example, obviously you shouldn't badmouth each other in front of the kids.
That's
Exactly.
the cardinal rule.
Exactly.
You've got the
Okay.
cardinal one there, Dina. Absolutely. In fact, I challenge parents beyond that point to not just resist saying negative things about the other parent to the child or within the child's earshot, but in fact to say positive things to the child about that other parent, or positive things about how that child is like the other parent. And that's a tremendously powerful thing for a child to hear. You have that laugh that's just like your dad's. I love hearing that laugh. Children light up when they hear that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's the cardinal rule, yeah.
That's fantastic. And what other things like that would you have the parents focus on to protect the
Their
kids?
communication, they need to practice communication strategies and techniques so that they are more respectful, more consistently respectful toward one another. Because kids will listen through walls. And kids pick up, their little sponges, and they pick up the emotional tone, whether it's in the room or not. And some parents go so far as to leave court documents lying about where children can read them. I know, it can get terrible. And so parents need to work very carefully to learn those respectful behaviors.
So I'm thinking that when the children are in the room or in the presence, that there should actually be this loving spirit there.
Yes.
And when the parent actually really wants to let off the steam, they need to go somewhere
That's
by
exactly
themselves.
right. That's exactly right. And even with our collaborative cases, we recognize that a parent will sometimes need to see the therapist outside the process of the collaborative divorce before one of those meetings,
Okay.
a four-way coaching meeting, for example, so that she or he gets to drain off some of that frustration beforehand.
Makes
Right.
total sense.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So each parent should have their own time with the therapist individually and then together?
I wouldn't say that every parent needs to have a private therapist, because the coach is really there to help that person contain the emotion. But if that person has a huge raft of resentment left over from the divorce that's actually triggered by early childhood stuff, it's going to be much harder for that parent to learn to contain just with coaching skills in a short-term kind of process.
Right.
Sometimes we do say, have you thought about getting some therapy for that to help you to deal with some of this residual anger so that it doesn't impact this
Yeah.
very important process
Yeah.
you've chosen?
Well, it definitely sounds like whether it's therapy or coaching, this is vital to the divorce procedure. So, Marianne, I don't know how to thank you so much for being here. Again, your information was invaluable to our audience, I know. So
Thank you so much. It's
you.
been very fun chatting with you all.
Absolutely. Thank
Hey,
you.
who knew divorce could be so much fun? This is great. We would like to thank all of our guests today. It was a fantastic conversation. Even though our relationships might be falling apart, our guests made us realize we can still keep it together. Thanks for sharing this half hour with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.